Welcome to Art+Object's final important paintings and contemporary art catalogue for 2014. All of the works that we're going to discuss in just a second are currently on view at Art+Object, 3 Abbey Street in Newton, of course, and of course the catalogue's online at artandobject.co.nz. But before Ben and myself and Leigh are going to talk to a few of the works, we have a very happy announcement to make. Leigh Melville, who's been with the company really since day one in 2007, has recently been made a director of the company. Please take the opportunity over the next few days to come in and congratulate Leigh. I'm sure many of you know Leigh, not only from her roles here at Art+Object, but also the Venice Patrons group, for which she's been a member and is now chair for 2015. And Leigh, of course, is a collector in her own right. And now we're just going to talk about some of the absolutely fabulous works in this catalogue.
Looking around this room, there is so many great works in this catalogue. It's been a little bit of a nightmare to put together. It's come together right at the last moment. One that pulls me in time and time again is this fabulous Colin McCahon painting. It's entitled The Lark Song. And I guess in a way it's a slightly unusual work insofar as the bodies of works or the series that McCahon was working with at the time. But it relates to two series of work, really the large-scale watercolour and acrylic-based works he was doing from a studio in Muriwai. They turn up from time to time. They're mainly known as the Kaipara Flats works or the Muriwai works. And then to a smaller body of works, which are entitled The Lark Song, which take as their inspiration the poetry of John Castleberg and also the words of Matiri Kiriyama, a Northland woman who collated in a wonderful book that McCahon came into possession of. I think it was called The Tale of the Whale or something like that. It was a book that affected McCahon quite profoundly and resulted ultimately in that wonderful work down at the Auckland Art Gallery at the moment called The Lark Song. This work obviously relates to that insofar as one of the key inscriptions it bears is this one in the heavens where it reads, "Can you hear me, St. Francis?" Now I think looking at McCahon's work, talking about McCahon's work, writing about McCahon's work, we return to a lot of things time and time again, but one of the things we don't really talk about is the doubt of McCahon. The doubt of all of us when it comes to even looking at art, appraising at art, but more broadly, the doubt we have in our day-to-day lives in a spiritual sense. And that was something that McCahon struggled with greatly, and I think it's something that is at the heart of this work.
This large canvas by Bill Hammond from 1996 is entitled The Colour Plates. And as is the case with many of Bill Hammond's works, the title is quite instructive. The title, The Colour Plates, references a number of really important New Zealand publications, most notably, of course, Buller's A History of the New Zealand Birds, which was published in 1873. It also discusses, of course, the fact that for many New Zealanders, our experience of engaging with the outside world, with news from other places, was from the colour plates in illustrated books and publications. In this particular work from Hammond in the mid-1990s, we really start to see the influence of his kind of momentous visit to the Auckland Islands in 1989, to Birdland, to a place devoid of human contact that gave Hammond an insight into what New Zealand might have been in its primeval state before the arrival of humans. We really see the influence of that voyage really starting to sheet home in this work, in the multifarious and numerous plates that illustrate this work, where Hammond picks out these emblematic images that document New Zealand's historical journey. Some of them are quite explicit. The publication here itself, which most probably was full of colour plates, entitled Ex-Birdland. This rather self-important settler figure alone in his room, probably there with a bottle of port or sherry. The desolate coastscapes, Shag Rock, the settler interiors with one of Hammond's own paintings there decorating a very homespun, raw, weatherboarded interior that you can see there with the upright piano. The Nikau, the lone figure in the land. In his essay in the catalogue, Oliver Stead's done some wonderful research work to talk about and discuss some of the important publications and documents that are referenced in this painting. But all these elements resolve themselves into one of Hammond's most successful large-scale canvases. And like the book from which the colour plates come, this is a canvas that really tells a story. And it's the story of a developing consciousness in New Zealand. 4 years after the colour plates, Hammond's palette and mood changes. Much has been made of Hammond's Renaissance links, artists such as Hieronymus Bosch, Peter Bruegel. But with the Limbo Bay works, the tone becomes far more Mediterranean and Italian Renaissance, and we think of Botticelli, Pinturicchio, Uccello, these lovely emblematic friezes where the tone is sunnier, less rooted in a New Zealand location and altogether more optimistic.
It's no secret around the A&O offices that I am a great fan of painter Gretchen Albrecht. We're both a couple of West Coast girls, and it's easy to see where Albrecht draws her inspiration for a painting such as this. Intriguingly titled Rocker, it's a fine example of Albrecht's use of colour field painting. The acrylic is diluted, washed and spilled over the canvas, and she's become a master at creating these wonderfully expressive paintings where the earth, the sea and the sky seem to mingle together, and although it's an abstract painting, it immediately brings to mind a landscape, a sunset, something that we've all enjoyed.
Another Colin McCahon painting in the sale, which I'm absolutely delighted to have, is this wonderful and intriguing cryptic work here called A Merkizich Daisy. This work popped up in my inbox a couple of months ago. It was an image emailed from Australia, and it really set me thinking, because I remember back when I was an art history student, it was a painting that had been used in a slide and I'd never seen or heard of it since. So I was absolutely delighted for it to come here for sale, not so much because of the monetary value, but more because it was a work that had always intrigued me and I'd never really understood or seen much other than in this slide. It's a painting with lovely provenance. It comes from the collection of a lady called Brenda Gamble. Brenda Gamble was a very close friend of McCahon's, an inspiration for several works, and she was, I think, originally a cleaner at Auckland Art Gallery, and then she became secretary, I think, to Peter Tomery. She acquired this work directly from McCahon, and it's been in that family ever since. What's particularly intriguing about it, obviously, is the reference to McCahon's contemporary, Milan Merkizich. Now, when we think about New Zealand art world, we always like to think of it as this great kind of collegial entity, but this one here maybe paints a slightly different story. Now, we know that McCahon engaged Merkizich's works in a certain way. The corner device, which features in a couple of the Merkizich corner paintings, was something that McCahon used often, and we'll see it just up in the gate painting from 1960 through to 62, a few years earlier. This one here is intriguing because, as well as the title, McCahon inscribes this, "I even sign this." Intriguing, and you have to make of it what you will.
There's a wonderful essay in our catalogue by Oliver Stead about Liz Moore's painting of Colin, which I hope you'll have the opportunity to read. But without wishing to be ironic, the painting does demand closer inspection. It's a fantastic example of Liz Moore's wonderful ability with paint and portraiture. Colin appears to us floating on a bed of bubbles among seashells. She's a 21st century Venus, yet she's full of 21st century flaws. There's something about her which isn't perfect, even though at first inspection she may seem ideal.
Another work which I think we're really lucky to have is this major photograph by the renowned and I guess infamous Australian photographer Bill Henson. Something we had to give a little bit of thought. Those of you that follow the international art world, and especially the Australian one, will notice that Bill Henson's work has never strayed too far from controversy, I guess by virtue of the fact that his main subject are these teenagers or young adolescents on the cusp of adulthood. And a couple of years ago, of course, the police closed down an exhibition at the Roslyn Oxley 9 Gallery. Ultimately, no charges were laid. The Australian Classification Board labelled them unoffensive and stamped a PG recommendation on the exhibition, but it did send shockwaves throughout the Australian art world and I guess throughout the world art world. Well, what the protagonists in the debate ignored is that Bill Henson is an artist of world renown who has been photographing for the best part of 30 or 40 years. His works are held in collections all around the world. Despite the subject matter and how various people may feel about it, what you cannot deny is the absolute beauty of the image and the beauty of his work with the lens. Henson works less like a traditional photographer and I guess more like a director or a cinematographer, styling these shoots whereby he employs these actors and actresses, props, state-of-the-art lighting to create these wonderful mise-en-scene images which are like stills from some otherworldly film.
It's really quite incredible to think that in this catalogue we have examples of 35 years of practice spanning 1969 to 2004 by Richard Colin. This is the earliest work in the catalogue, entitled Walking Man. There's a wonderful photograph that Richard sent through to us that shows the original exhibition at Barry-Lett in 1970, the artist with that magnificent beard in front of this very work. And at this time, Colin's concerns were about the relationship of the individual to their community. So this is quite an unusual single lone figure. There are many wonderful crowd scenes with this softly modulated, rounded, almost sculptural painting form. from the 1960s and 1970s. They are a long way from the cutouts, but in this catalogue we see Colin's artistic journey for more than 30 years. I'm standing next to Richard Colin's Still Life with James Joyce from 1994. It's a large 79-piece cutout and really encompasses almost all of the techniques and technologies that Colin has employed with the cutouts. I think the title is very instructive. The artist himself said that James Joyce is a writer that he's very interested in, particularly Joyce's way of constructing his passages of prose. The writer, in a way that Colin himself has echoed with his cutout technique, employed an almost automatic writing technique where he would write phrases on cards and then arrange them almost like a jigsaw to assist him in creating the narratives and even the sentences for his novels. Every now and then an auction catalogue throws up a real surprise, and here's one. This is 100 Revolutions by Shane Cotton from 1993. I think the surprise is that this work hasn't been seen since it was originally exhibited in 1993. To think that such a major work has not been curated into one of numerous Shane Cotton exhibitions on either side of the Tasman for the last 20 years is quite extraordinary. 1993 was also the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in New Zealand. And I think that's a really telling date, and the motif here couldn't be clearer. The references to women's suffrage, the domestic implements, and the importance of education and learning. Look, there's an apple for teacher at the top of this stack of books, is Cotton's own way of celebrating 100 revolutions that have taken place in 100 years since women got the vote in New Zealand.